The gods once claimed Earth as their garden, a divine playground of endless indulgence. What they built was a gilded cage, beautiful from afar, rotting inside. Humans were not citizens, we were sacrifices. Tributes. Cattle. Every god had a domain, and every domain demanded suffering. The god of war required blood. The god of harvest demanded flesh. The god of justice, Theros, he was the worst. Not because he was cruel, but because he believed he wasn't. His punishments were righteous. His massacres balanced. They told us the gods maintained peace. They told us we were lucky to be ruled. They told us silence was sacred. I remember the silence when my mother screamed. Theros burned a village to cleanse corruption. My mother was one of the corrupted. She taught children to read ancient texts the gods had banned. She believed in things older than their rule. When the fire came, she didn't run. She sang a lullaby from a time before temples. I survived. They called me the half-breed. A mistake. A living blasphemy. Born of a human priestess and a god so minor he was erased from memory. I grew in shadows, listening to mortals' whisper of rebellion, and gods' whisper of fear. They feared me. They had reason to. For years I waited. I trained. I studied their words, their weaknesses, their rituals. I learned the ways of divine energy, not to worship, but to break it. Every god believes they're eternal. But all power has rules. All rules can be rewritten. The right of balance was announced. 1,000 human lives offered in flame to preserve order. That was my moment. Theros stood upon his sanctified altar, preaching peace while men, women, and children burned at his feet. His voice echoed across cities, soothing the masses. He was a god in full regalia, surrounded by sycophants, blinded by glory. He never saw the blade until it pierced his chest. Forged from the marrow of a dead star, bound with stolen divine light, it sang as it struck. Not a song of heaven, but of endings. He looked at me, not in rage, not in fear, but confusion. As if it never occurred to him a human could do this. As if he couldn't fathom why. His blood fell black and steaming. The fire died. The crowd screamed. The heavens cracked. And I stood, blade still warm, waiting to be taken. I didn't run. Let them see. Let them know. We are not afraid of gods anymore. They bound me in chains forged from divine law, links that tighten with every act of rebellion, every thought of defiance. They called a council. The full pantheon gathered, more gods than I'd ever seen in one place. They sat on thrones of light, carved from worship and fear. They looked at me like I was filth crawling across polished marble. The god of wisdom asked first. Why did you kill him? The god of war demanded execution before the question finished echoing. He's a threat. End him. The god of mercy wept. There must be a reason. They circled me with questions, accusations, commands. I said nothing. Not because I couldn't, but because they weren't ready to listen. Then came the question again, slower this time. Why? I raised my hand and pointed at the image projected below us. Earth. Scorched. Cracked. Crying. A planet once green now dressed in ash. Look at what you've done to Earth. The silence that followed was longer than the question. They saw it all, whether they wanted to or not. The truth poured out like venom, uncaged, undeniable. They saw a city wiped out because a farmer prayed to the wrong god. A child hanged for hiding forbidden seeds. Oceans boiled because someone asked if mortals should have a voice. Every plague, every famine, every act of God laid bare as choice. Divine decisions made with indifference and pride. A mother holding her dead son in a flood of sacred fire. An artist painting in secret, only to have her hands shattered as punishment for unauthorized beauty. You called it balance, I said. You called it order. The god of justice had kept detailed records. He thought himself fair. I made them look. The scales were never even. The weight of sin always fell on the mortal side. One by one, some gods looked away. A few, the oldest ones, remained unmoved. They didn't care. Their rule wasn't about fairness. It was about permanence. But cracks formed. In their unity. In their certainty. One of them whispered, "We didn't know it had become this." I smiled. "You chose not to know." They asked if I had help. I told them no, God aided me. No one whispered secrets. Everything I used came from what they left behind. Every fragment of power I wielded was stolen from their own temples, their own arrogance. The gods debated in circles. Some wanted to erase Earth completely. Start fresh. Others wanted to rebuild. A few suggested giving humans limited freedom, just enough to keep them obedient. I laughed. They didn't understand. It wasn't about revenge. It wasn't about rebellion. It was about ending the cycle. You can't unburn a world. They called me mad. A fanatic. A traitor to my blood. But one god leaned forward. The youngest. She had never walked Earth, never taken tribute, never raised a temple. She asked, "If we gave it all back, if we left, what would you do?" I told her the truth. We would fall. We would bleed. We would make mistakes. And we would rise. Without you. They didn't like that answer. But they heard it. And they remembered it. Because it was the first time a human didn't ask for mercy. The chamber fractured before a verdict was spoken. The gods turned on each other, not with blades, but with belief. Those who still clung to control saw my act as infection. A disease to be purged before it spread. Others, the younger ones, questioned everything. Not because they agreed with me, but because they saw the truth in what I showed them. They feared Earth less than they feared change. The god of flame declared war then and there. Let the humans burn with their half-breed messiah. His eyes glowed with centuries of unchallenged power. But another spoke, one whose name had been silent for eons. She was once worshipped for kindness, but the council had banished her compassion. Her voice was calm, but every word cracked the marble beneath her. We failed them. If you burn Earth again, you will burn me too. That was the moment the gods were no longer one. On Earth, the news spread faster than fire. A god had died. A human had stood trial. A goddess had spoken for mankind. No longer whispers in alleyways. No longer hidden altars and secret chants. Humans came out of the shadows with fists full of shattered icons. They tore down idols with bare hands. They painted slogans with ash and blood. Some prayed not to gods, but to each other. A symbol emerged, Thero's broken blade, crossed with a human hand. In the chaos above, the chains broke. Not because the gods released me. Because the council could no longer agree on who held the keys. Some turned their backs. Others fled. The gods, eternal and unshaken for millennia, fractured under the weight of their own silence. I walked free. The goddess who had spoken joined me, not as a ruler, not as a savior, but as a witness. "What will you do now?" she asked. I looked back at the council chamber, crumbling from within. Prepare. She didn't follow. But she didn't stop me. Earth was already changing. Temples converted into homes. Sacred scrolls rewritten in human hands. No longer were we begging for rain or mercy. We were planning. We were remembering. We were arming. We found old things beneath the bones of cities, forgotten relics, half-god ruins, echoes of power not born from divinity but from resilience. And we built. Tools first. Then weapons. The gods didn't descend in legions. Not yet. They watched. Calculating. Arguing. They thought we'd collapse under the weight of freedom. But they forgot what suffering teaches. We are not gods. We are something else. We are the species that survives. We are the species that adapts. And when pushed far enough, we are the species that fights back. They came in silence. No warnings, no declarations. Just thunder without storm and light without warmth. The first god to strike was one who had remained neutral at the council. He believed action would remind humanity of their place. His descent shattered a mountain range. He expected submission. He found resistance. We didn't wait for his sermon. We buried him in his own crater. The weapon was crude, metal forged with divine essence, activated by human will. Imperfect. Unstable. But it worked. His blood turned the earth gold. We didn't worship it. We poured salt over it and moved on. More followed. Some gods attacked from above. Others corrupted minds below. Temples became battlegrounds. Cities became shields. Every time they struck, we learned. Every loss became instruction. Every death had meaning. We weren't just fighting gods. We were becoming something they couldn't define. The humans who once prayed now built. The humans who once feared now taught. Farmers became engineers. Orphans became strategists. Former priests turned rebel architects of resistance. Their faith had not vanished. It had evolved, into memory, into defiance, into something unkillable. I never asked to lead. But they followed because I never looked up when the gods appeared, I looked forward. They followed because I bled beside them. Because I never lied. I told them we would lose people. I told them some of us would fall. But I also told them this: for the first time, every step we take is ours. And still, the gods argued. Some hesitated. Some offered peace, but on terms that would chain us again. The goddess who once stood for us returned with a warning. They will offer mercy as a weapon. They will offer order as a leash. They will give you everything, except freedom. I answered without pause. Then we take it. The sky cracked again, this time not from a god's fury, but from our reach. Satellites once used for worship repurposed for war. Divine gates hijacked to intercept celestial reinforcements. The stars themselves watched as humanity, for the first time, stepped into myth not as servants, but as rivals. The gods still had power. But power without control becomes fear. They feared us now, not because of what we had, but because of what we no longer needed. Them. And when they realized they couldn't stop us, they turned to the one thing they had left: legacy. They began rewriting their own stories. Trying to frame their downfall as sacrifice. As misunderstanding. As tragedy. But the truth had already rooted itself into the soil, carved into stone, etched into bone. The war isn't over. It won't be for a long time. But the tide has turned. We don't kneel anymore. We don't beg. And when the last god falls, their name won't be sung. It will be forgotten.